Hey YouTubers, got another video review for you today. This one's from a company by the name of Kuject, and what this is a set of solder seal wire connectors, and they go by a bunch of different names. Some people will call them solderless wire connectors, even though they do have solder on the inside connector part, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Some people call them no crimp wire connectors. I've heard them called solder and seal connectors. So it just depends on who you're talking to and what they're calling them. You know, I'm sure if you've never used these before, you're wondering, how does this work? First things first, you've got this little connector here, and then right in the very middle, you see the little silver piece right there where my finger's touching. That is some low temperature solder. What you do is you slide your wires in from both sides and have them connect like you would normally on a crimp connection, but instead of using your pliers to crimp, you use a heat gun, or if you're really careful, you can take a butane torch like this, or even a cigarette lighter if you're really careful and in a pinch. But they recommend that you use a heat gun, which is pretty much just a glorified hair dryer. And what you want to do is you want to put it on the lowest setting, and the reason being is because you don't want to burn that heat shrink tubing, because you'll end up getting a hole in it, and you don't want your wires touching, or you want them to be sealed up, and you don't want them to touch another wire and create a short or something. So you just want to be real careful on how you heat it up. And then once you start to heat it up, solder, that low temperature solder there in the middle, it will wrap around the wires and make a nice connection. But then the clear part of the tubing, it'll shrink down. But then you see the yellow bands on each side of that connector. That is actual glue. And so that glue will shrink down in there, and then that glue will just seal up all the way around the wire, so water can't get in there and start corroding. Before I forget, these connectors, they're really handy to have around the house, just simply because they range anywhere from a size 10 gauge wire all the way up to a 26. So that's your most common size wires that you're going to be using. And if you ask yourself, hey, well, you could just use a soldering iron and a connector and heat shrink tubing. Yeah, you could, but there's certain applications where you wouldn't want to. Let's say you've got a nice hot rod and you've just got through finishing up on it, and you need to do some wiring up underneath the dash. Well, you definitely don't want to take a soldering iron and or solder in your new vehicle and try to solder a new connector up underneath the dash. You might accidentally touch something, or melt a wire, or drop some solder on the carpet, or even get some smoke from the soldering iron on your headliner. So that's where these solderless type connectors are going to come into play. And even on a trailer iron, and sometimes you might not have access to an outlet to plug in a soldering iron or whatever. And like I said, if you're in a pinch, you could always use a little butane torch, or even a cigarette lighter, as long as you don't melt the heat shrink and burn a hole in it. And as you can see, I've already pre-stripped the wire ends. If my camera will ever focus up, there we go. See, I've stripped it back a little bit, and I stripped the other wire right here the same way. So I've got two wires already stripped back, and you don't want to strip them too far back, because you got to remember there's not a whole lot of solder in that little ring. So don't go crazy and strip it way on back to like right in here or nothing like that. Now, I noticed with the Kuject connectors here, it does show in the picture, and it does recommend a heat gun that has the deflector attachment on there, and that way it keeps a lot of the heat all the way around on the connector, so it melts that solder all the way around instead of just on one side. And that's going to be the key to these connectors, is you want to keep them moving. You don't want to burn a hole in them or none of that. So you want to just try to treat them as if they're on a rotisserie or something. You want to keep them moving, so you don't burn through. you're going to take and slide your little connector on your wire, and then you've got your little spliced in right here, and then you got your other little spliced in, and you just take and you put them together. I'm sorry the camera's not focusing great for me. Alright guys, as you can see, I went ahead and slid the connector in the middle of where the wires are spliced at. So now what you want to do is just take and you want to turn your heat gun on low. I'm sure you could run it at a higher speed, but you got to keep it moving because you definitely don't want to burn no hole into the insulation. So you want to give it a second while it heats up, and then once it's warm, then you want to take and then you just want to put that little connector right there near the heat gun. And just be careful, don't burn your hand or anything, because they do get really hot. And as you'll start to notice, it's starting to shrink down, and the glue is melting on each end of the wire. There you go. And you know, this is a low temperature solder, and it's really neat how they've developed this and made this work, because you got to keep in mind the solder has to melt before the heat shrink tubing on the outside of the jacket. So that is pretty interesting that they were able to figure something like this out. And you can see that it only takes a second. Let me put this behind there so you can see it. The crazy camera will focus in. I don't want to end up getting burnt, but you can see that it makes a pretty damn good joint. Now it's still hot. I wouldn't sit here and try to pull on it right now with it still being hot, but I would, you know, give it a few minutes and let it cool down, and definitely give it a little tug on it. But you can see that the little red bands have melted in, and it's done a really good job at sealing the wire in and making it waterproof. You can see that the heat shrink tubing has done a great job. Anyways, I think it's for a quick, simple solder joint. When you're in a pinch, I think this would be great just to have on hand. And I would say now it's cooled off enough now where I could start tugging on it a little bit. But let's give it a pull. Believe it or not, it's stronger than what I thought. I mean, I'm pulling on that. I mean, I know you guys can't see me pulling off camera, but let me wrap it around my fingers so I can. Yeah, you're not gonna pull that apart. And wow, I'm shocked. That's every bit as strong as any crimp joint that I've ever had to deal with. I've been doing crimp joints and heat shrink tubing and doing connections on wiring for over 20 years, and this is as good as any of those. It's really strong. Now if you examine up close, you can see some of the wiring didn't get solder on it all the way around. So yeah, it's probably not quite as strong as using a soldering iron and you know, solder. But you also got to remember, like what I was saying before, not everywhere would you want to be able to get in there with solder, because you don't want to you wouldn't want to drip hot solder on your hot rod's carpet, or burn a hole in the dash or something, or smoke up that headliner with the fumes from the soldering iron. So this is a great alternative, and let's pull on it some more and see if we can. Yeah, there's no breaking that loose. It's not going to come apart easy at all. So I'm happy with that. And as far as the connector with it sealed up around the wire, it's done a really great job. I don't think you would have any problems with water getting in on this. So I'm happy with it. So anyways, I just wanted to pass this product on to you guys. These things are like $10, like 10 or 11 bucks on Amazon. I'll try to put a link in the description so you can find it. They do have a website. So anyways, if you're doing car audio or wiring up train horns or something like that, which I've been doing, and I've done a lot of car audio before, and you're doing any kind of trailer wiring, this product is definitely something that could save you some time and a hassle. So anyways, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos on this types of product, these type of connectors, and people were saying that they had been using these connectors for 20 years. I didn't know they had been out that long, but they said that I read several where they said that they were used in the aerospace industry and even in the military. So I read one mechanic said that he had used them wiring up on tanks in the military, and then somebody else said that they had used them from doing some sort of wiring on an airplane. So don't know if it's true or not, but that's just what I read. So anyways, appreciate you guys watching, and hope this helps somebody out. And if you're looking for a good connector that's waterproof, that's easy to operate, and if you don't have a bunch of tools like crimpers and a soldering iron and solder and all that stuff, and you just have a cigarette lighter or a butane torch and you're in a pinch, then this would be a good tool for you to keep in your toolbox, because it definitely does come in handy. So thanks for watching, and if there's a product you'd like to see me do a review on, please put it in the description below, and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching.